Hey, this is Glenn Livingston, BecomeARealCoach.com, and I'm here with the Possibility Coaches, John and Chris. How are you guys today?
Doing great, Glenn.
Great, Glenn.
And we can find you at PossibilityCoaches.com, correct?
That's right.
That's right.
Excellent. I've actually worked with John and Chris before, where we kind of developed part of the Successful Coach product together. I like them so much I wanted to invite them back to come onto the blog and be heard by the wider audience. One of the reasons that I like them was that I thought that they had a unique knack for opening up people's minds to possibilities and hope in ways that they hadn't felt before. And they kind of challenged me to come up with a topic for our conversation. And I said, okay, how about how to become unstoppable? I'll give you just a little bit of background for this because it occurred to me while I was hiking. I'm a big hiker. Most people on my list know that. And periodically you come across an obstacle that it just seems impossible to cross. So I'll give you an example. There's a hike that has a very high rushing river that kind of looks like it runs up to your knees in most places. And I'm working very hard on hiking the 4,000 foot mountains in New Hampshire. Don't ask me why I'm doing this, just because they're there. There's this one trail. I've got like 3 more left to do. And there's this one trail where you have to cross this river. And I keep getting up to this one point, which is about 5 or 6 miles in, and I can't cross the river. I try jumping on the rocks. I brought my poles. I have my waterproof boots. I'm standing really tall. It looks to me like it's treacherous. And each time I get up to there, I say, I can't believe I did this again, but I'm going to turn back. And I start to think, maybe I just can't get across the river. Maybe I just can't do it. And the other day, I'm at that same spot again because I'm a determined guy or a masochist, one of the two. I see these 2 kids get there and they just walk through the river in their boots. They don't bother trying to stay dry. They just walk through the river in their boots, and it wasn't treacherous at all for them. And if you know anything about that kind of a river, if you can find a firm foot at the bottom, it's much, much, much safer than trying to stay dry and hop on top of the rocks that could be mossy or slippery or wet. Maybe it sounds corny, but my whole paradigm shifted, and what seemed treacherous, seemed like it was impossible to cross, seemed like it was stopping me in my goal in life at this point. In that flash of an instant, when I saw those kids go across the river in the boots and they didn't care about getting wet, I thought, well, that's the secret. Then it occurred to me that as coaches, a lot of what we do is try to help clients see their problems in different ways to open up possibilities and help them think new thoughts. And I think that every coach has a different way of going about getting their clients to that point. But I thought, John and Chris, that maybe there were a couple of stories you could tell or a little bit about the method to your madness to help people get over the kinds of irrational stoppers that get in their way and make them feel like things really aren't possible when they are. How's that for a very long-winded introduction?
That sounds great.
Well, it's great. Your stories is a prime example of the power of belief and a shift in perception. That's a great picture that you painted in my mind and for everyone. You just looked at the situation differently and you resolved it just by doing that.
That's what I was trying to do, was paint a picture. Could I ask you, how long have you been doing this? Many years, right?
Yeah, it's about 12 years now. Mm-hmm.
You've had a lot of clients, and you must have seen people, who was it, Pogo, that said, I've met the enemy and he is me?
Right.
You must have seen many people that stop themselves, yes?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and most do.
Most people stop themselves in one way or another.
Right, and there's several different ways over the years that John and I have found out that people stop themselves, and we tend to call it sabotage. So there's many different methods of choice that people use to sabotage themselves from moving forward. And that's what we could talk about right now, Glenn, is some of the ways that people sabotage themselves from moving forward and how John and I diffuse that.
I would love to talk about that. Why don't we do that?
Okay.
One of the ways, and this was really familiar when we were starting out in our practice, was the way people stop themselves from moving forward is they use the number one excuse, which was, I don't have the money for coaching.
Oh, I've heard that before. And then you say, well, that's the first thing we'll have to work on.
Right, exactly, right. You know, and it's sort of like that. Chris and I, we used to call that the knee-jerk reaction. I don't have the money, I don't have the money, I don't have the money. That was the pat answer that people would give to prevent them from living a magnificent life. Mm-hmm. Put money in front of them as a preventive to moving forward.
Yeah, and so one of the ways that John and I would work with somebody with that is if they said they didn't have the money, what we would ask them is a series of questions. One of the questions would be is if money were not an issue, well, let's just set money aside. Are there any other concerns that you have about getting started with coaching? And then we would address all of their questions as they came up. And many times we found out it really had nothing to do with the money. It really had to do with some kind of fear. usually fear of what may come up and come out during the coaching sessions, or fear of being held accountable, fear of success, fear of failure, and so on. So, as we addressed all their concerns, it became apparent to them that money was really not the issue. And if it was, we would also ask a deeper, further question. Is it really the money, or is it that you don't want to invest in yourself? Because if you went out to your car in the morning and you had 2 flat tires, would you leave the car there? Well, no, they would find a way to come up with the money for the 2 new tires. It's the same thing with coaching. Are you willing to come up with a way to invest in yourself so that you can move forward? And it's also enlightening people that it's not very selfish. Coaching is not selfish. It's really something that you're doing so that at the end of the day, that the best investment you can make is in yourself, and the best gift you can give to the people around you is an emotionally healthy you. So that's the best thing you can not only do for yourself, but for all the people around you. So we would just address those type of issues with them if they had a money concern.
I love what you're saying on several counts, because this is hard for a lot of new coaches to get. It's not like people have money burning a hole in their pockets. When I first got into this, I thought people would come to me and say, I've got $4,000 or $5,000 extra this year. I'm interested in doing some self-reflection and soul-searching and having some accountability and working on some goals, and I perceive you as the ultimate expert, and I would like to give that to you so that you could help me achieve these goals. And that just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen.
When people are facing challenges, let's face it, it's easier to go out and go shopping, and a lot less painful perhaps sometimes.
Or to come up with excuses.
Or to come up with excuses than sit down with someone and open your heart to them.
Yeah. Or to have a cigarette or beer.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Get involved in a bad relationship, or all the ways that people love to screw up their lives. People are very prone to do that. One of the ways, by the way, when people were frightened of working with me because of the money, if let's say that they talked to me about that on the phone before they came to see me, first of all, I'd say, well, don't worry, you can come for a session and we can talk it over. And if for some reason we can't work that out, I know a lot of other coaches, or in the early days it was my therapy practice, and I know a lot of other doctors and people that work with different insurance and everything like that. And the money conversation isn't really a conversation that's easy to have before you've established a value. Tell me if you guys feel differently. But the client needs to kind of come and engage in the process first before they can see that it's going to be a valuable process. And I think a lot of coaches make the mistake of trying to hold too fast to the finances too early on. And then the other thing I would say sometimes in the early days was, well, what would you like to pay then? Tell me what you'd like to pay. And I would find that if I had that conversation after I'd established value, people are more or less aware of what the fees are. And if they feel like you're giving to them a reasonably well person, and in coaching we're talking about working with reasonably well people, they're going to want to give back to you. They're not going to want to take advantage of you. And if they happen to say, well, I'd like to pay $5 a session, you say, well, okay, I could do that for 3 sessions, something like that. And then I never had that happen, but I supervised people who had that happen. I never really had that happen. So those are some interesting ways to overcome financial resistances. Is there a particular story you wanted to tell with that, or did you want to move on to the next way?
I would just say, Glenn, and you make such a valid point, is people tend to be more concerned with cost than value. And it's really important as a coach to show them that the value that you're providing and going to be giving to them. If you go right to our website, we do offer everyone who comes to our website a no-cost, no-obligation 30-minute coaching session by phone or Skype. This is our icebreaker, and this really works because once someone comes onto the phone with me and Chris or connects through Skype and they see the value that they can receive in 30 minutes, they're usually on board with us.
Yeah, I totally agree.
One of the other stoppers that we commonly come across is from people who say that they're either too old to change, or you can't teach an old dog new tricks or something like that, and just feel that at whatever age they might be, and we've heard this from people in their 30s, and we've heard this from people in their 60s, that they feel they can't change. And that's something else that John and I, we find that to be a common theme among a lot of people. And we always explain to people that they can change. You can change at any point in time in your life. And Glenn, you and I and John had talked about this before. As long as there's some bit of willingness on their part to change, they can do it. And we also give some examples of people who had successes later on in their life. One example is Louise Hay, who's the owner of Hay House Publishing House. She publishes all the self-help books, and she didn't start that publishing empire until she was in her 50s. So it's never too late to change. It's never too late to grow. It just takes a little bit of willingness.
I want to tell you a quick story, and then I want to give you a perspective on I'm too old to change, what that can actually mean. My grandfather was an orphan, had a very difficult life, some things I probably shouldn't disclose publicly. By the time I was born, he had kind of repented and he was a new man, and he was, I think, 54 when I was born, something like that. I only knew the Grandpa Mike to be admired, and he kind of got his finances together, and when he was 71, he decided he wanted to go to college. So he went and got a GED, and he got into college, and he graduated college, and I believe that he was just about to earn his master's when he died in sociology. Those were the happiest years of his life. Sometimes I look back on that and I think, well, what if at 54 years old, what if he said, I'm too old to change? It's too late for me. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. What would the rest of his life have been like? And what about all the people that he touched? You can kind of picture this. He was a very affable, jocular old man. His old bald guy, he used to take his teeth out at dinner. It was really funny. But what about all the people that he touched in that college and the connections that he made and how much happier his wife was? And what about me? What about the fact that he was developing a life and then he could be a grandfather? I had a much better life because he was willing to do that. And the alternative would have been for him to say that I'm too old. And so the question I ask people sometimes when they say that, I'll say, well, so what's the plan then? Let's play out your future if you change. Let's play out your future if you don't change. And what's the plan? What do you see? And I think that you touched on the other piece of it when you said, well, there has to be a willingness to change. And I think sometimes when people say or tell themselves that they are too old to change, I think that what they're really saying is they don't want to. It's not comfortable. They're too happy with their routines. There's some secondary gain that's reinforcing whatever problems they're having. Whatever they're upset about, it would be more upsetting for them to change. So I think that's something we have to all keep in mind. I like this conversation so far. What's the next way?
Well, it kind of segues into what you just touched on, too, is the other question we find that comes up a lot is that it's too hard to change. Again, it has to take that willingness, but also people are invested in their life. They're invested in their stories. They're invested in their self-image, and change shakes up that whole formula. So sometimes people are afraid to change because they don't want to lose their identity. And their identity is this whole concoction of what they've made up about themselves throughout their whole lifetime. And John and I, many times, we teach people how to create a new story about themselves rather than living in the story of the past or living in the story of being a victim or whatever the case may be. We assist people to move forward by creating a new story for themselves.
For example, could you possibly give me an example?
Recently, we had someone who was having a great amount of difficulty in a relationship with her ex-husband. And prior to coaching, she felt so stuck and she felt like a victim of her ex-husband, and he was really bullying her. And during it and after the coaching process, she said that she realized that before coaching, she was like this cork. I mean, imagine a cork from a wine bottle, and you threw it into the ocean. It's bounced around in the waves, in the ocean of life. And she said after coaching, she realized that she was living in a self-imposed prison. And most significantly, she realized that she had the key in her hand the whole time.
That's what coaching did for her. So what we did was we sat down with her and she wrote an actual story, one-page piece of paper, on how she wants her life to be as a single mom and her career and her relationship with her ex-husband, her relationship with her son, how she wants each of those areas of her life to be. And she inserts that in a clear plastic sleeve, takes that with her throughout the day, reads that throughout the day. So she's starting to create a new identity for herself.
And sometimes the process of just articulating those goals makes you realize there are doors you can open that you weren't aware that you can open. I think that language is the food of the intellect, and the intellect is what allows us to make healthier decisions about the emotional turmoil we tend to find ourselves in. When we articulate the full extent of our goals, we can look at that from our adult self. We can be reasonable and look at what's actually possible, as opposed to when it just kind of festers inside of you, you feel like something is holding you back, but really the truth is something was holding you back in the past, which doesn't have to hold your adult self back. So you don't have to understand that whole explanation, but what you do want to have to understand is get yourself and your client to articulate their goals in full. They will naturally want to gloss over things. It's your job to ask them texturing questions that help them dimensionalize the who, what, when, where, why part of every goal that they have. And that process in and of itself makes them more unstoppable than they were before they came to see you. Would you agree?
Yes, totally agree on that. And it's so important as coaches that we assist people to have a a different perspective on either a situation or in their life by taking them around the back door and looking at this situation totally different and in a different way than they have looked at it before.
One of the things, Glenn, that we do, which may or may not be unique, but I feel it's been a very powerful component of our coaching practice, is we teach people how to get out of their head and into their heart and stop listening to the analysis of the mind, which can lead them on some really good paths. However, one of the things that Chris and I firmly believe is that your heart never lies. And if we assist people to move into their heart, they seem to get really clear results in their life, clear positive results.
But I would like to add, there's a difference between the healthy heart and the dysfunctional heart.
How can you tell?
The way we explain it to our clients is that the one that makes you feel good about a decision that you're making, that you feel very clear, very focused, and you feel good about what you're doing is the healthy heart. The dysfunctional heart is the one where the fear and the worry and the fretting comes from and the anxiety.
I see. That's interesting.
Yeah, and I could use an example. One of our other clients that she said to us, well, it's my heart that always gets me into a mess. It's my heart that makes me stay in a relationship hoping that he'll change if I just love him more. That's not really your heart. Your heart says the relationship's not healthy. Your heart says it's time to move on. It's the dysfunctional heart that says, well, maybe he'll change. Maybe if I stick it out another week, maybe if I let him hit me only 2 more times, he'll change. That's not really the heart. That's what we call the dysfunctional heart. The authentic heart, the fully centered heart, is the one that really does know the answers. It's also your intuition, your gut.
Yeah, I think what you're describing is the gut feeling which you're capable of holding. And I find that when people are in destructive mode, they're very impulsive. They will say they have this feeling and they must act on it right away. When people are driven by inspiration and creativity, and when that happens, you can talk to them about it for a little while before they have to act. And they can talk to themselves about it for a little while before they have to act. And that seems to be the difference between constructive feelings and destructive feelings, or the good heart and the evil heart in your paradigm.
With inspiration, there's a sense of urgency, but it's laced with really peace and a knowing that you're on the right track. It's a very different feeling than a destructive, chaotic action that most people live by.
Hey, John, you said something as you were introducing this topic, which I thought could be perceived as a stopper. You said this might not be unique. And I wondered, do you think that people stop themselves because they think they have to be unique?
Yes, they do. They already are unique. You already are unique. The 3 of us talking, we're each unique in our own way. And that's the beauty of being human. I wouldn't let it be a stopper. My suggestion, and I suggest this to clients, is run with that uniqueness. That's what makes us different.
Yeah.
That's what makes us special and unique, is what makes the world so incredible. We're creators. We're naturally born creators, and that's what we're here for. We're here to expand and to grow and to share and to create and to promote our talents and gifts.
And I also believe, too, that each one of us was brought here to the planet with each of our own unique gifts that only we possess. And sometimes those gifts come so natural to us that we don't think there's anything special about it. So it's so important to take a look at what your uniqueness is, what you do differently, or how you say things differently than other people, because that's a clue to where your gifts lie.
And is there any other set of questions, or how would you suggest that people do that?
One way, and this ties in with finding your purpose and passion in life that John and I talk a lot about, one simple way to explore that is first give yourself permission to explore your purpose, your passion, to find your meaning in life. Allow yourself to explore. And one way you can explore, and it's so simple, is just to go into a bookstore, either a local bookstore or a large bookstore like Barnes & Noble, and just be mindful of what section you're immediately drawn to. It could be sports, it could be gardening, cooking, personal growth, whatever. But there's a clue there, because on a gut level, on a heart level, what you're immediately drawn to, there's usually an indicator of where your passion lies.
You know, I love that. I love that because when I walk into a Barnes & Noble, it's almost like there's a magnet that sucks me to a particular section. I love that. I bet that a lot of people can identify with that. I'm not going to tell you what section that is or I might get arrested.
Guess which section Chris and I are drawn to.
Right, personal growth, right?
Yeah.
There are others also. That's number one.
I think the particular way that coaches get stuck, where they stop themselves thinking that they need to be unique, is they may have been coached and had a phenomenal experience having been coached, and that's why they want to be a coach, and they think they need to be like their coach. I've had a number of coaching clients that have said to me, I would love to be a coach, but I could never give my clients what you give your clients. I could never do that. And I would say, well, I hope not. I hope that you give them what you give them. I don't want to make an army of duplicates. I have other evil fantasies, but I don't want to make an army of duplicates. I don't. I want to be in this world to help people prosper their own gifts like we're talking about. So cool. Okay. Have you thought of some other ways that people stop themselves?
It's too much work, one way. We touched on that already. But one of the things that we always like to point out to people is, well, the truth is it takes a lot of work to be negative and to be suffering emotionally.
And to stay stuck.
And to stay stuck.
That's interesting.
It's a lot less work to be happy and to thrive and to enjoy your life.
I heard this once before that it takes more face muscles to frown than it does to smile.
Yes, that's true. Say a little bit more about the work involved in staying stuck and negative.
It takes a 24/7 commitment. I look back at my own personal history, Glenn, the first 40 years of my life, and I was a poster child for negativity. And from the moment I opened my eyes, it required me to search and find negative situations that were going to put me in a position of being victimized, which would, at the end of the day, cause me to just fall into bed and be exhausted.
I see. Because the world is actually full of wonder and beauty. Yes, there is horror in the world, and yes, there are things to be furious about, but you can't help but go through a day and take a breath and appreciate the wonder of this world. To not do that requires an effort to shield yourself from the wonder of the world.
Very true.
Absolutely.
Well put.
And John and I always say you can't be sick enough to help the sick or poor enough to help the poor.
Could you expand on that a little bit? I'm not sure I understand.
Sure. It's so important that when you're coaching with someone that you do resonate with them or they resonate with you. What John and I have found is there's a line between resonating with them and becoming empathic. So if somebody is down and out, their story is horrific, and as coaches we come across all these different stories. If you get down in the pits with them, you can't help them. That's more or less what we mean by that.
I see. Feelings are contagious. It's next to impossible not to experience your client's feelings if you are an empathic, tuned-in, attentive person. And in order to be a good coach, you kind of need to be an empathic, tuned-in, attentive person. I suppose you could just whisper to them there's scorpions and spiders under the chair or something, but you need to do that. The metaphor that I think of is that I need to let those feelings pass through me and hold on to my uplifting self regardless. I find that if I fight the feelings and I try to pretend like I don't have them or like they're bouncing off me or that I'm invulnerable to them, then that actually requires a lot more energy and I'm not able to really listen to what they're saying, and in the end I don't really help them. What's your perspective on that?
I totally agree with that. The one thing, though, that John and I have a little bit of a different perspective on, and we learned this in the very beginning when we became coaches, we were very empathic in the beginning, and at the end of the day we were totally exhausted because it was as if we were giving our power away or our energy away to our clients. And we learned that there is that fine line, and we learned to move from being empathic to being compassionate. Compassionate means I understand what you're going through. I've even been there. But again, I'm not going to get in the pits with you. I can't be any help to you if I'm crawling on the ground with you. There was a way that it was like we had to learn how to attach, but then we also had to learn how to detach to create a little bit of a buffer and really learn how to listen to people, again, without getting mired in it with them.
I think you're describing exactly what I'm describing in different words.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Are there other ways that you've thought of that people typically stop themselves that you'd like to help them not to, or maybe coaches in particular?
Well, another way, sometimes people will get started in coaching. This happens quite often.
As a client.
As a client, and they get started, and then think we start moving along, and a month goes by, and then we get to the point where, well, would you like to continue? Would you like to commit to another 4 weeks or another 3 months or whatever package we happen to be offering? And let's say, you know what, I'm feeling really, really good. I'm going to temporarily stop coaching and see how it goes.
And this may be the frustration of the coach because you know that person is just about ready to have that breakthrough. They're just about ready to reach that tipping point, and then they do what we talked about earlier. They sabotage, they pull back from the coaching process. And that could be a little frustrating for the coach to watch someone move forward and then pull in the reins and choose not to continue.
Oh, sure. It has a bad impact on the economics for the coach because clients are more likely to refer once they've actually achieved their goals. How do you handle that? How do you get people through that?
Well, one of the things that I do from a perspective as a coach is, I first will attempt to show them the benefits of continuing. And if that doesn't work, it doesn't become a begging situation. In other words, I show them that you're making progress. Why stop now? When you're on the doorstep to creating a tremendous breakthrough and a tremendous success in your life, why stop? One of the other things is I've learned as a coach is and Chris talked about detachment, and this takes practice over time when you're in practice, is to let it go, let that person go, and know that when they're ready, they'll come back for more.
Interesting, yes, because you don't want to ruin that possibility by fighting with them too much. I find that that's true with certain types of clients, but then there are some clients that get into a revolving door state where they'll come for a few sessions, they'll get to a certain point, and then they leave over and over again. And I find that if I'm not willing to go toe-to-toe with them at that point and be a little more confrontational, which is different than begging. Actually, I didn't get good at this until I was at a point that I didn't really need any more clients.
That's interesting, yeah,
Right.
that you said that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't do that, then they don't get the breakthrough and they don't get the results. And it's frustrating for me and it's frustrating for them. There are reasons that people don't accomplish what they want to in life. There are very strong feelings that are stopping them. I think there's no such thing as an easy client, and sooner or later everybody gets to that point. And if you have carefully observed what tends to stop them in their lives otherwise, and you've carefully observed what tends to move them forward, that's the time you pull out the big guns and use everything you've got to get them through that point. Otherwise, it just doesn't happen. And they'll go on forever, that revolving door situation, repeating the same thing in their life over and over again.
And it's interesting, Glenn, you mentioned too that you get to a point, or you had gotten to a point when you really didn't need any more clients. And it's difficult for a new coach who does feel they need clients. But when you're coming from that vibe of neediness, I need you to do coaching so I can pay my mortgage, or I need you to do coaching so the electric bill is due. Somehow your client senses that, and they sense that there's like a lack of being genuine and that it's not about them.
They feel like you're looking at them like a dollar sign.
Exactly. Yeah, and they can really pick up on that.
Yeah, that's why I keep a cash register right next to my chair. Just kind of get it right out in the open.
That's right. Cha-ching.
Yeah. Did you have other ideas that you wanted to talk about today before we went down? Ways that people stop themselves?
One other way that comes to mind is, and this happens with a lot of people, especially over the age of 40, they say I should be further along than where I am in my life. That's a biggie today.
Mm-hmm.
We hear that a lot. And the truth is we're each where we're supposed to be in any given moment.
And that's what we do, John and I. We shed the light on that for people because we have heard that from people that are 21. We've heard that from people that are 27, in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. So it really doesn't matter what age you're at. That seems to be a common theme in our society because we're told we're supposed to be at a certain place by a certain age. We should have so much money in the bank by a certain age. We should have a house when we reach a certain age. So we have all those type of pulls from society pulling us in a certain direction. We show people that you are where you are right now, and the reason you're supposed to be where you are is because you're there. From this point forward, we can show you how to keep continuing to move forward. And we do have a story with one of our clients who came to us just for that very same reason, that he felt he was stuck in a rut. He was about 50 years old. He didn't have the money that he thought he should have in the bank. And through the coaching process, he actually had a paradigm shift because he realized that everything he needs, he has within him, and he's got a source of wealth within him. So he's not defined by his toys or the amount of money in his bank account or the type of car that he was driving. He realized that he is enough already. And that was what his challenge was that he was coming from a deep down feeling of I'm not good enough, I'm not enough. And then we got him through the coaching process to realize that he is enough. That's when he had that paradigm shift.
Yeah, and that the constant rumination about not being far enough in life, not being good enough, not having accomplished enough, that's a vicious cycle because it actually prevents you from accomplishing and doing the things you're trying to achieve. So it's very, very important to cut through that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, I just think that these thoughts, these ways of shifting typical paradigms where people stop themselves into new possibilities, to me, it's really part of the core of what it means to be a coach because it restores hope, energy, and possibility to our clients. And I couldn't think of anybody better than the possibility coaches to interview about that. Hey, I'd like to encourage people to have a look at possibilitycoaches.com, and maybe even take John or Chris up on their free 30-minute session if you are interested in that. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to the audience or that I should have asked you that I didn't before we stop?
Sure. One of the things that Chris and I are really big on in terms of a philosophy is that possibilities do lead to opportunities. One of the things that Chris and I also believe is that opportunity does not knock once or twice in a lifetime, as many of us have been taught to believe. We believe that opportunity is always knocking. The key is that we have to be awake to see them right in front of us. You have to be in a state of mind that you realize that the door is always open for you to enter. And it's really important to put yourself out there and inject yourself into life, no matter what you're doing, be it becoming a coach and starting a practice or whatever you're doing. And this is where success truly happens, when you really allow yourself, Glenn, to intersect with other people.
That's true.
Becoming a bigger person and building relationships. There are so many people out there more than ever that are seeking support.
And you know what's so interesting? I have a large portion of my audience that really, I guess you guys don't know my whole story, but after a very big financial downturn, I went through a period where I didn't want to do coaching anymore. I didn't want to do therapy anymore. I didn't want to do corporate consulting anymore. I just wanted to work behind my computer and move electrons around and make money. And I got reasonably good at it, so I developed a large following of people that wanted to do that too. But the truth is that real success comes from connections with other people. All the money you'll ever make is going to come from other people anyway. There's something unnatural about trying to hide behind your computer to make as much money as possible.
And evidence of that is we're so grateful for the connection that we made with you. And you never know how it's going to happen.
I'm grateful for it also, guys. I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you. We have too.
Yes.
Thanks very much for your time and attention. If you'd like to find out more about taking your coaching to the next level, getting certified, and building the practice of your dreams, please visit becomearealcoach.com. 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 Thank you.